Your uncle's fishing stories? Amateur Hour. History ran a full-time BS factory. In the next minutes, you're getting 27 hoaxes. The slickest, dumbest, most unbelievable cons ever swallowed. Not just by random gullible strangers, by kings, scientists, whole nations, marching in a synchronized conga line into humiliation. And the best part? These lies didn't just pass, they thrived. The kind of truth that makes you stare at humanity and whisper, how? Stick around. The later ones get so bold they feel illegal. 1. War of the Worlds Radio Panic. October 30th, 1938. Orson Welles and his radio crew decided America deserved a shared near-death experience. They turned H.G. Wells's War of the Worlds into a string of breaking news bulletins. Martians in New Jersey. Heat rays torching everything. Total chaos. And if you missed the part where someone basically said, "Relax, it's a play," then congratulations. You were living through the actual, literal end of the world. People reportedly fled, jammed up phone lines, begged for help, and likely made some deeply questionable last-minute deals with whatever deity answered. Now, sure, some argue the panic got amplified by newspapers that loved a good scare almost as much as Wells did. But what's not debatable is the jolt it sent through the country. It proved radio could convince you doom was seconds away, even if it was just actors cracking themselves up in a studio. And we complain about fake news now. Precious. 2. Operation Mincemeat in World War II was a con so audacious, so perfectly grim. It sounds like a spy thriller scribbled during a fever dream fueled by strong cheese and stronger delusion. Britain needed the Nazis to believe the Allies would hit Greece and Sardinia, not Sicily. The solution? Find a corpse, dress him as a Royal Marine officer, chain a briefcase of fake top-secret invasion plans to his wrist, and let him wash up off Spain where pro-German officials would do the rest. They even built Major William Martin a whole life. Love letters, receipts, overdue bills, the kind of personal clutter that screams real human being. And it worked. The Nazis swallowed it whole and shifted forces away from Sicily. One dead body, forged paperwork, and peak British stiff upper lip creativity arguably altered the war's trajectory. You truly couldn't invent something that ridiculous, except they did. And it was brilliant. 3. Yes, the Hitler Diaries. In 1983, the German magazine Stern announced a historical earthquake. They'd obtained Hitler's private diaries, 60 volumes of personal thoughts, little sketches, and presumably petty complaints about decor. They paid millions. Historians lost their minds. It was the find of the century until, surprise, it wasn't. Experts quickly noticed the paper was too new. The ink didn't match. The bindings screamed post-war. And Hitler's signature looked like it had been copied by a spider wearing oven mitts. The diaries were cooked up by Konrad Kujau, a busy forger of Nazi memorabilia with a gift for imitation, and an even bigger gift for tricking people who wanted it to be true. Stern was left with maximum humiliation and a very expensive pile of fake angst. A crisp reminder, before you declare a miracle, maybe check the stationery. 4. And here we have Nessie, the Loch Ness monster. The ultimate, is it real? Or is my aunt just 3 drinks ahead? Cryptid. For decades, the crown jewel of evidence was the 1934 surgeon's photograph, that legendary long-necked silhouette rising from the dark water like a prehistoric celebrity. It was eerie. It was iconic. It was also completely staged. Turns out it was set up by Marmaduke Wetherell, a disgruntled big-game hunter who'd been publicly embarrassed after an earlier Nessie discovery of his got exposed as a hippo's foot. Yes, that happened. He and his crew built the monster using a toy submarine and sculpted putty. One of them confessed on his deathbed years later. But by then, Nessie had already gone global. Fake or not, the photo locked the legend into place. Proof that people love monsters, especially when they come with a conveniently grainy photo op. 5. The 1990s were a golden era for alien believers, and nothing hit harder than the alien autopsy footage. This wobbly, top-secret film showed scientists dissecting a very dead, very gray, very ET-coded creature supposedly recovered from the Roswell crash. It was shocking. It was horrifying. It was essentially a guy in a rubber suit packed with butcher shop offal. Ray Santilli, the promoter, made a fortune. Years later, he admitted it was a reconstruction, with only a few frames claimed as original, which were equally questionable. The effects artist who built the alien eventually stepped forward too. But the damage was already baked in. For a whole generation, that shaky footage of a fake alien getting its insides inspected became proof we weren't alone, and that aliens apparently moisturize with sandpaper. 6. For years, elaborate crop circles popping up overnight in English fields baffled scientists, energized UFO theories, and probably shaved a decade off several farmers' lifespans. Alien messages, energy vortexes, hyper-intelligent badgers with geometry degrees? In 1991, two cheerful guys showed up and went, "Nah, lads, it was us," using planks, rope, and late-night stealth stomping. They'd been doing it since the 70s for fun. Paranormal experts were devastated. Ufologists screamed, "Cover up!" Doug and Dave just shrugged, likely over a pint, having pulled off one of the longest-running, widest-reaching pranks ever, powered by boredom and a truly wicked sense of humor. Honestly, iconic. 7. In 1912, amateur fossil enthusiast Charles Dawson discovered Piltdown Man in England, the missing link. Big humanish brain, ape-like jaw, exactly what British science wanted as proof they were humanity's origin story. For 40 years, Piltdown Man was evolution's celebrity. Textbooks adored him, museums worshipped. The only microscopic issue? It was an absolute, shameless, full-throttle forgery. A medieval human skull cap paired lovingly with an orangutan jaw, teeth filed down, and everything chemically stained to look ancient. It took until 1953 for science to finally go, "Hang on, why does this jaw feel like it belongs in a banana commercial?" Piltdown Man. Proof that if people want a narrative badly enough, they'll ignore the screaming primate in the room. 8. Shinichi Fujimura, nicknamed God's Hand, was Japan's archaeological superstar for years. He had an almost supernatural gift for finding ancient artifacts, pushing Japan's timeline back by hundreds of thousands of years. He'd dramatically pull Stone Age tools from the ground while cameras flashed and academics gasped. Genius, instinct, destiny. Except that instinct involved sneaking onto sites the night before, burying the artifacts himself, then discovering them the next day like it was magic. He was basically a magician planting the rabbit, except his hat was Japan's national historical record. When a newspaper sting caught him literally burying his own finds, his divine reputation collapsed like a prehistoric cookie under a boot. Japan's oldest artifacts were about as ancient as his shovel work. 9. In the 1970s, the world fell in love with the discovery of the Tassidae tribe in the Philippines, a Stone Age group living in total isolation, untouched by modern life. They wore leaves, used stone tools, and spoke a unique dialect. Anthropologists cried. National Geographic splashed it everywhere. It was like uncovering a living time capsule, except it wasn't. Years later, skeptical journalists returned without warning and found the Tassidae wearing jeans, listening to radios, and generally looking extremely not Stone Age. The whole thing appears to have been staged by a connected Filipino politician for fame, money, and possibly to shield the land from logging. The noble savages were basically regular people convinced to play dress-up for the cameras. A reality show disaster, before reality shows even existed. 10. The Amityville Horror. Yep. In 1975, the Lutz family abandoned their house in Amityville, New York, after just 28 days, claiming it was crawling with demonic activity. Green slime, winter flies, creepy voices, a demonic pig named Jody. The story became a best-selling book and a blockbuster film franchise. People were terrified, and a lot of it was, frankly, nonsense. Later investigations and admissions suggested many events were exaggerated or straight-up invented, potentially with help from their lawyer, who saw dollar signs doing cartwheels. A real tragedy did happen there earlier, a mass murder, but the later haunting was largely performance. The real horror is how many millions got made by scaring people with something that leaned far more fiction than fact. 11. Enter P.T. Barnum, a man whose entire vibe was, why let truth ruin profitable chaos? In the 1840s, he unleashed the Fiji mermaid. Imagine a monkey's upper half stitched onto a fishtail, then dried into a nightmare mummy. That was the scientific marvel. Barnum promoted it as undeniable proof merfolk existed, and the public, bless them, lost their minds. Newspapers screamed. Crowds poured in. More skeptical people probably just stared at it thinking, why does it look profoundly depressed? Of course it was fake, likely crafted by someone with too much time and a dark sense of humor. But it sold tickets. People paid happily. Humanity stared into the abyss, and the abyss smelled faintly like old fish and bad decisions. 12. New York, 1869. Some men dig a well and suddenly, bam, a 10-foot petrified giant. America immediately short-circuited. Biblical evidence? Ancient monster? Bigfoot's grandpa? The farmer Stub Newell turned his land into a ticketed attraction overnight. Even Barnum, the emperor of "Is it real, or did I just black out?" wanted in on the action. But the punchline? It was just a massive carved rock, created by George Hull, a professional grifter who wanted to mess with religious believers and get very, very rich. It wasn't even a great statue. Think lumpy stone potato with unresolved anger. And still, crowds lined up for miles, because if you hype a story with enough confidence, people will pay to believe in a dumb rock with a backstory. 13. Barnum struck again in 1835 with Joyce Heth, whom he claimed was George Washington's former nurse, and 161 years old. He exhibited this frail, blind, mostly paralyzed elderly African-American woman who told audiences wildly embellished stories about little George. Was she actually 161? Did she really change the first president's diapers? Absolutely not. After her death, a public autopsy, because Barnum never met a boundary he couldn't monetize, suggested she was likely under 80. Barnum, of course, just spun the whole mess into more spectacle. It proved something uncomfortable. Audiences didn't merely tolerate being fooled. They practically demanded it. And somewhere in there, the American entertainment industry was born. Possibly from a lie about a very old lady. 14. England, 1726. Mary Toft announces she's giving birth to, yes, rabbits. Not chocolate ones, actual bunnies. And did doctors call for sanity? No. They grabbed notebooks like kids at a magic show. One royal surgeon nearly combusted with excitement, declaring it miraculous. For weeks, Mary functioned as a rabbit factory, producing bits of bunny like some cursed confetti cannon. The secret? Let's just say Mary had a very helpful storage system and a friend with suspiciously easy access to rabbits. When someone got caught smuggling a tiny bunny into her room, the whole fuzzy fantasy collapsed instantly. Mary confessed. The medical geniuses suddenly rediscovered dignity and vanished. Seriously? How did an entire medical community buy that? 15. The Dreadnought Hoax of 1910 is the kind of prank that makes you wish you could time travel with popcorn. A group of mischievous British aristocrats, including a young Virginia Woolf, yes, that Virginia Woolf, decided it would be hilarious to clown the Royal Navy. They painted their faces, threw on elaborate robes, and showed up as the Emperor of Abyssinia and his entourage. And the Navy? They rolled out full honors, gave them a grand tour of HMS Dreadnought, the most powerful warship in the world. The Abyssinians spoke a nonsense cocktail of Latin and invented phrases like bunga bunga, and the officers nodded like, ah yes, ancient royal protocol. When it got exposed, the Navy was mortified. Parliament laughed itself sick. And Wolfe likely walked away with enough material to fuel a lifetime of authority is absurd energy. 16. Theodore Hook, a 19th century prankster with an alarming surplus of free time, bet in 1810 that he could make any London address the most famous place in town within a single day. His victim, 54 Berners Street. His technique? Pure chaos. He sent out thousands of letters under forged names ordering deliveries, services, and urgent visits, coachloads of dignitaries, dozens of pianos, coal carts, wedding cakes, doctors, lawyers, priests. Even the Lord Mayor showed up. The street became a traffic-choked madhouse for hours. Hook watched from a rented room across the way, likely vibrating with joy and sipping tea like a villain. He won the bet and earned a permanent spot in prank history for someone who very clearly needed a hobby. 17. William Henry Ireland was a teenage literary forger with ambition outrunning talent. In the 1790s, he started discovering lost Shakespeare manuscripts, letters, and even a whole new play, supposedly found in an old trunk. London's literary world melted down. Experts authenticated them. The new play, Vortigern and Rowena, even got staged. But there was a small problem. It was awful, like fan fiction written by a dramatic goth teenager in a candlelit basement. At the premiere, the audience laughed so hard at the lines the performance basically imploded. Ireland eventually confessed, expecting admiration for his cleverness. Instead, he got roasted. Still, for a brief moment, he convinced the literary elite Shakespeare sometimes wrote like a total hack. That alone is almost impressive. Almost. 18. Edgar Allan Poe, master of gloom and chaos, decided in 1844 that journalism needed a hard shove. So he published an article in the New York Sun, framed as factual reporting. A 3-day Atlantic crossing by a steering balloon called Victoria, piloted by aeronaut Monk Mason. It had precise, and entirely invented, technical details, dramatic tension, and even a passenger list. New York went feral. The story exploded. People celebrated the breakthrough. Then, days later, the Sun admitted it was a hoax, Poe's little experiment in selling papers and messing with readers. Poe, doing fake news before it was a lifestyle brand. And you thought your feed was bad. 19. Now to 1835. The New York Sun decided reality was underwhelming and cranked fiction to maximum. They announced that astronomer Sir John Herschel had found life on the moon, not bacteria, not plants. We're talking bat-winged humanoids, unicorns wandering near sapphire temples, and beavers apparently doing architecture with lunar swagger. The pieces were written with such confident detail that readers ate it up. Sales skyrocketed. Rival papers, choking on their own standards, reprinted it anyway. Meanwhile, Herschel, actually in South Africa doing real science, was probably wondering why people suddenly thought he was best friends with moonbats. The Sun shrugged, having already taken gold in the 19th century clickbait Olympics. 20. Clifford Irving was a novelist with nerve the size of Texas. In the early 1970s, he convinced McGraw-Hill he was secretly co-writing the autobiography of Howard Hughes, the eccentric billionaire who hadn't been seen publicly in ages. Irving forged letters, signatures, and even staged interviews with Hughes, meaning he basically talked to himself in a different voice. He scored a massive advance, media hype, even a Time magazine cover. It was the literary scoop of the century until Hughes himself, from whatever sterile bunker he lived in, held a telephone press conference just to say, essentially, "I have no idea who this guy is." The scam collapsed instantly, and Irving went to prison. But for a while, he lived like a king, one fabricated anecdote at a time. 21. The donation of Constantine was basically a document-shaped cheat code for papal power. Supposedly written by Emperor Constantine in the 4th century, it granted the Pope authority over large chunks of Western Europe. For centuries, it served as the Church's ultimate trump card in political fights. Question our rule? Constantine said, "There was just one tiny inconvenient issue. It was fake, and not even a subtle fake." Later scholars noticed the Latin sounded suspiciously like the 8th century, like finding a Roman scroll that casually drops yeet or no cap. It was obviously written centuries after Constantine, designed to justify control. When it got exposed, the Vatican basically coughed politely and pivoted away. For a few hundred years, oops. 22. The Louvre. Elegant, cultured, and occasionally shockingly easy to fool. In 1896, they paid a fortune for a spectacular gold tiara supposedly belonging to a Scythian king named Citophernes. It glittered with gold, packed with epic scenes. The kind of ancient bling that screams, museum centerpiece. For years, it was a star attraction. Then experts began whispering about tool marks that looked a little too modern. And then the twist. A goldsmith from Odessa, Israel Rukamovsky, casually admitted, "Yeah, I made that. For a friend. My bad." He even offered to recreate part of it to prove it. The Louvre tried to save face, but yes, their ancient treasure was a modern masterpiece of deception. The silence in those halls must have been brutal. 23. For decades, Anna Anderson mesmerized the world with a single claim. She was Anastasia Romanov, the youngest daughter of Russia's last Tsar. Saved from execution, she had the eyes, the sadness, the haunted vibe, enough to convince former courtiers, distant relatives, and armies of romantics desperate for a miracle. Legal battles dragged on for years as she sought recognition and access to wealth that basically didn't exist anymore. It was drama worthy of a Russian epic. Then DNA testing arrived in the 1990s. Verdict: not Anastasia. She was likely Franziska Szankowska, a Polish factory worker with a history of mental illness. But for over 60 years, she lived one of history's most famous imposter lives, proving that a tragic story, told well enough, can make people rewrite reality for you. 24. 1817, rural England. A mysterious woman appears, speaking a language nobody recognizes, dressed like she escaped from a deeply confusing costume trunk. She claims she's Princess Caribou from the exotic island of Javasu, kidnapped by pirates and miraculously escaped. Local high society, likely starving for entertainment, devoured it. They housed her, dressed her up, and treated every nonsense word like an enchanting riddle. For weeks, she was the queen of the bazaar. Then the reveal: someone recognized her. She was Mary Wilcox, a cobbler's daughter with theatrical flair and zero patience for ordinary life. She invented the language, the backstory, the royal attitude, all of it. And did people banish her? Nope. She became even more famous. Proof that if the story is juicy enough, society will forgive almost anything. 25. The Travels of Sir John Mandeville, appearing in the 14th century, was basically medieval-era travel blogging on maximum fantasy settings. Sir John claimed he'd roamed the world, meeting one-eyed giants, dog-headed men, lands where jewels grew on trees, and assorted impossible marvels that sounded amazing from the safety of your chair. For centuries, people treated it as real. Scholars quoted it. Explorers, including Columbus, drew inspiration from it. Tiny detail: Sir John Mandeville likely wasn't even a real person, and the book was a glorious mashup of myths, borrowed tales, and pure invention, possibly by a cleric with too much imagination and not enough supervision. It was armchair adventure at its finest, proving that even in the Middle Ages, people loved stories about places they'd never, ever see. 26. England, 1917. Two cousins, Elsie and Francis, decided, fairies are real, and we've got photos. The images showed them posing with tiny winged figures that looked suspiciously like flat cutouts from magazines held up with pins. But nobody wanted to focus on that. Even Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, yes, the creator of Sherlock Holmes, bought it completely. A believer in all things mystical, he basically became their hype man. For decades, the Cottingley fairies became a cultural obsession. Only when the cousins were much older did they admit it. Cardboard, props, a prank. Sometimes people don't just want to believe, they need to. 27. In 1998, a website appeared describing an endangered species, Octopus paxarbilis, an amphibious octopus living in Washington's rainforests, swinging through trees with its tentacles like it pays rent up there. The site had photos, clearly manipulated, science, and urgent calls for conservation. It was created as a media literacy test. and people still fell for it, hard. Teachers reported students writing heartfelt essays about saving the poor tree octopus. It became a go-to example of online gullibility because an octopus in a tree is just believable enough, if you want it to be. Bless the internet. And bless humanity's eternal ability to believe anything, as long as it's typed confidently next to a picture. So after 27 hoaxes, we're left with one uncomfortable question. Were people just spectacularly gullible? Or are we still swallowing the same tricks today, just with better lighting and stronger Wi-Fi? Which one of these was the most brain-meltingly dumb? Or straight-up genius? And better yet, what modern hoax do you think future historians will laugh at the way we're laughing now? Drop your wildest answers in the comments. I read all of them. And if this made you laugh, gasp, or reconsider the last 5 centuries of human decision-making, hit like and subscribe. Because there's a lot more historical absurdity where this came from.